anger and wrath, these are abominations, says this first reading from Ecclesiasticus, and the sinful man will possess them. If one passes through life in observant mode, one can study personalities with some interest. We're coming across this term in studies because one has to do a certain amount of psychology also in priestly studies, behaviorism, and one can read partly a person from his behavior and even from his facial expression. One can detect, if one is careful, probably this, for instance, wrinkled forehead, this perpetual look is symptomatic of something of this nature, bitterness within. I may have told you before, but I'll say it again because it's something which hit me when I was a student, the testimony of this charismatic speaker who came to us one time, one Friday evening, and he had great gifts, and he had been praying sometime in a group. He'd been asked to talk to this group, and so he was going from one to the other praying over them, and he came to this lady and he was given knowledge, and he had very clear knowledge in this case. He was insistent that he could see it very clearly, that in this person there was unforgiveness. And he said to her, "Sister, is there something in you, in your heart, some bitterness, some unforgiveness?" And she immediately said that there was, because she had lost her husband in the war. Well, there's no point in hanging on to this. And so he was trying to get her to let go of this unnecessary burden. Forgive the Germans? Never. My dear sister, what is the point of hanging on to this years later? It's not doing your soul any good. Forgive the Germans? Never. And so he had to back down from his prayer, but he could see and he knew that there was here something going on which was having an effect on her because she wasn't well, and he could see the link. It was hardening also her soul. There was a cancer there in the soul, impacting on the physique. So he had to abandon the project of trying to pray for healing for her, but by chance he was called back to that group a couple of years later, and the lady was still there, but by then she was in a wheelchair, and he knew that this was the direct result of bitterness in her heart, unforgiveness. And so the soul does impact on the body, and one sees it. And also this element of unforgiveness is far more pervading than one actually cares to admit. It manifests itself in indirect modes. Envy, the green-eyed monster. Someone else gets our place, and we will react subtly, but all the time really, and it's the fruit of. There was, some centuries ago, quite a frightening scene. I forget the details of it, but I know it went something like this. There was a person who was about to die, but there was something precisely of this nature in his soul, and it must have been known. There was some ongoing feud. And he went to a confession just before he died, and obviously, presumably all was said and done. But it didn't finish there, unfortunately, because he didn't quite die immediately, and it seems, and I forget how it was known, but it was known, because there was a saint involved, that he either came back or whatever, but the thing was, he didn't make it on the other side. He was lost. And the reason was, and I think he had to admit it in some way, that he had had the time to go back, as it were, to his comfort zone of unforgiveness and hatred. And only the Lord could have seen that, but it was in his heart, and it was enough to block him entry into glory, even though he just had, actually, sacramental forgiveness. So it's serious. And one sees it in church life. One can see dysfunctional communities, dysfunctional prayer groups, dysfunctional parishes. It can even happen among the brotherhood of priests. There can be bad vibes. One wonders why. So on this day where the Church invites us to think about this element, it's important that we don't exclude ourselves from the number as though we weren't concerned. We are concerned because we are in some way always hurt by people who damage us. There is lots and lots of hurt out there in the world. It can be just a simple thing like being badly treated on the road, somebody who's a rude driver. That happens quite a lot nowadays. There seems to be an increase of impolite driving on the road, and our internal reactions can act accordingly. They were losing grace rather than praying for the person, as the Lord invited us in the Sermon on the Mount. Pray for those who treat you badly. On the other hand, we have a choice. Okay, I will react in my soul. I will wish that person harm. Of course, in the travelling community, it can go as far as curses, and they do. And unfortunately, the curses can work, because the devil loves to hear them. Ongoing feuds and curses which bring, as they put it, bad luck. And they come to us to get them lifted. With regard to what St. Paul says in the Epistle to the Romans, it's something also to be aware of, and also in this same context. None of us lives to himself. Now, this element of being available and being able sometimes to be, as it were, walked over without reacting is a liberating force. If we cling on to our every right, we'll never be free. It's a secret, actually, to go through life without clinging on to all our rights of vengeance, or whatever it might be. Many people have lost peace for years and years and years, even until death, in some legal battle or some personal family battle. Was it worth it? There's an old saying, isn't there? There are no pockets in a shroud. Let's take care of our soul, not go through life in bitterness. For what is there eventually will come out. And a joyful soul is not hanging on to bitterness. He's free.